I stood there in the blinding Colorado sun, squinting at the empty spot where our car had been just 10 minutes ago. My wife, Chloe, and her friends, Isla, Stephanie, and Lauren, had vanished. At first, I thought it was one of their stupid pranks. They were always doing stuff like this, pushing boundaries, testing how much I'd take before I snapped. 5 years of marriage, and I'd gotten used to their little games, the way they'd laugh at me, the way Chloe would join in instead of standing up for me. But this felt different. My phone was still plugged into the car charger, my wallet tucked in the glove box. All I had was the faded t-shirt and jeans I was wearing, and a growing pit in my stomach as the minutes ticked by. We'd been on this road trip to Stephanie's lake house for 3 days now, and I'd been miserable the whole time. Chloe had begged me to come, said it'd be a chance to bond with her crew. I wasn't big on the idea. Her friends always treated me like an outsider, tossing out jabs and inside jokes I wasn't part of, but I went anyway, because I loved her. Or at least, I thought I did. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, just a dusty little stop off the highway with a flickering sign and a single pump. I'd gone inside to use the bathroom, figuring they'd wait. They always waited. Except this time, they didn't. An hour passed. I paced the cracked pavement, kicking pebbles, telling myself they'd come back any second. Tires crunching gravel, Chloe's voice calling out, "Gotcha." But the road stayed quiet. 2 hours in, sweat was dripping down my neck, and my throat was dry. I kept replaying the last few days in my head. The way Stephanie smirked when she accidentally spilled coffee on my lap. How Lauren whispered something to Chloe that made her giggle while glancing at me. How Isla just watched it all with that smug little grin. I should have seen it coming. They'd been building up to something, and I'd been too dumb to notice. A truck pulled up, its engine rumbling loud enough to shake me out of my thoughts. The driver, a big guy with a gray beard and a stained ball cap, leaned out the window. "You okay, buddy?" Been standing there a while. His voice was rough but kind, and it hit me like a punch. I wasn't okay. They weren't coming back. Chloe wasn't coming back. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, my ride left me. You think you could help?" He nodded, like it wasn't the first time he'd seen someone stranded out here. "Hop in. Where you headed?" I didn't even know. Home. Back to Chloe. The life we'd built. But as I climbed into the cab, something shifted inside me. 5 years of her laughing at me, brushing me off, letting her friends treat me like garbage. It all came rushing up, hot and heavy. I stared out the window as the gas station shrank in the side mirror. The trucker didn't ask too many questions, just kept driving, humming some old country song. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. I could have borrowed his phone, called Chloe, demanded answers. But what would she say? "It was a joke, babe. Don't be so sensitive." I'd heard it all before. Every time I complained about her friends, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I didn't get their humor. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I never would. But standing there alone, abandoned like some stray dog, I realized something. They didn't get me either. And Chloe? She'd picked them over me, again and again. The trucker dropped me off at a crossroad, pointing me toward Grand Junction, the nearest town. "Good luck, man," he said, tipping his cap. I nodded, my throat tight, and started walking. My shoes scuffed the dirt, the sun beating down on my head. No phone, no money, no plan, just me and the open road. Part of me wanted to turn back, to beg someone at the gas station to call her, to fix this. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me forward. I was done being the punchline, done being the guy they laughed at. Chloe and her friends thought they'd won, thought they'd broken me. But as I trudged toward Grand Junction, a strange calm settled over me. They hadn't broken me. They'd set me free. I didn't know what was waiting for me in that town. I didn't know how I'd eat, where I'd sleep, or how I'd get by with nothing. But for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of what Chloe would think. I wasn't worried about her friend's next move. I was alone, yeah, but I wasn't helpless. The road stretched out ahead, endless and empty, and I kept walking. They'd left me behind, but maybe that was the best thing they could have done. Maybe this was my chance to figure out who I was without her, without them. By the time the sun started dipping low, turning the sky orange, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back. Not to Chloe, not to that life. Whatever came next, it was mine to build. I stood at that dusty crossroad where the trucker dropped me off, the Colorado wind kicking up little swirls of dirt around my feet. Grand Junction was somewhere ahead, but I didn't have a map, a phone, or a dime to my name. Just the clothes on my back and a head full of spinning thoughts. Chloe and her friends had left me high and dry, and part of me still wanted to find a way to call her, to hear her voice, to demand she turn the car around. But then I remembered how she'd laughed when Stephanie accidentally knocked my beer over at the lake house, how she'd shrugged when I asked her to stick up for me. 5 years of that. 5 years of feeling like a guest in my own marriage. No, I wasn't calling her. Not this time. I started walking toward town, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. The sun was still high, baking the ground, and sweat soaked through my shirt. I didn't know how far Grand Junction was. Miles, probably, but I didn't care. Every step felt like a choice, like I was leaving her behind one footprint at a time. My mind kept drifting back to the gas station, to the moment I stepped out of that grimy bathroom and saw nothing but empty pavement. They'd planned it, hadn't they? Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, all giggling in the car as they peeled out, thinking it'd be hilarious to ditch me. I could almost hear Chloe saying, "He'll figure it out, he always does." Well, I was figuring it out now, just not the way she expected. A pickup truck rumbled by, and I stuck out my thumb, hoping for a lift. The driver, a guy with a scruffy beard and a faded flannel shirt, slowed down and leaned out the window. "Need a ride?" he asked, eyeing me like he wasn't sure if I was trouble. "Yeah, heading to Grand Junction," I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded. "Hop in. I'm going that way." I climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the break. The cab smelled like oil and cigarettes, but it beat walking. "What's your story?" he asked as we rolled down the highway. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Got left behind by some people I thought I could trust." He grunted, like he'd heard that one before. "Happens more than you'd think out here." He dropped me off on the edge of Grand Junction, near a cluster of low buildings and a blinking traffic light. "Take care, man," he said, and drove off. I stood there, taking it in. A small town with a mix of old brick storefronts and newer chain stores. People going about their day like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong for me. No wallet, no ID, no way to prove who I was. I needed help, and fast. I spotted a sign for a homeless shelter a few blocks down, a plain building with a cross painted on the side. My stomach twisted at the thought. Me in a shelter? But what choice did I have? Inside, it was dim and smelled like bleach and stale coffee. A guy behind the counter looked up. Roy, his name tag said. He was older, maybe 50, with a shaved head and a no-nonsense stare. "You lost or just broke?" he asked, sizing me up. "Both," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "Got ditched out on the highway. No money, no phone, nothing." Roy didn't blink. "Happens. You got a name?" "Yeah. Mike," I said, figuring it was easier to stick to the truth for now. He handed me a clipboard with a form. "Fill this out. We'll get you a bed for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." That night, I lay on a cot in a room full of snoring strangers, staring at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't shut off. Chloe's face kept popping up, her voice, her laugh. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still ached for her to show up, to say it was all a mistake. But Roy's words stuck with me. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." He didn't mess around. The next morning, he sat me down with a cup of weak coffee and a plan. "You need ID to do anything. Job, bank, whatever. Takes time, but we'll start the process. Meantime, you need cash." I nodded, feeling useless. "Know anywhere hiring?" I asked. Roy smirked. "There's a diner down the street. Owner's a tough old broad named Jacqueline. Tell her I sent you." The diner was a squat little place called Jackie's, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Jacqueline was behind the counter, a wiry woman in her 60s with tattoos snaking up her arms and a voice like gravel. "Roy says you need work," she said, not even looking up from wiping the counter. "Yeah, I do," I replied, shifting on my feet. "Anything you got?" She squinted at me, like she was trying to see through me. "Dishwasher quit yesterday. Pays crap. Hours are long. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." I blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. "Okay, I'm in." She tossed me an apron, and just like that, I was scrubbing plates in the back, hot water soaking my hands. It wasn't much, but it was something mine. No Chloe, no friends laughing at me, just me and a stack of greasy dishes. Roy checked in later that week, helped me file for a replacement ID. "You're doing all right, Mike," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I wasn't so sure, but I kept going. The shelter became my home, Jacqueline's diner my lifeline. I didn't call Chloe, didn't even try. Every night, I fell asleep exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. I was starting over, from nothing, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make it work. I woke up on that cot in the shelter every morning with the same ache in my back, the same buzz of snores and coughs from the other guys around me. It had been a couple of weeks since Chloe and her friends ditched me at that gas station, and I was still getting used to this new life. Scrubbing dishes at Jacqueline's diner, sleeping on a borrowed bed, wearing clothes from a donation bin. My hands were raw from the hot water and soap, but I didn't mind. It kept me busy, kept my mind off her. Roy had been a rock, helping me navigate the mess of getting a replacement ID. Takes time, he'd said, handing me a stack of forms. But you'll get there. I nodded, grateful for his gruff kindness, and kept pushing forward. The diner was my world now. Jacqueline didn't mess around. She'd bark orders from the counter, her sharp eyes catching every mistake. Move faster, Mike, we ain't got all day, she'd yell, but there was no real venom in it. I worked double shifts whenever I could, piling up cash in a little envelope I stashed under my cot. My first paycheck wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a cheap prepaid phone from the gas station down the street. I held it in my hands, the plastic still shiny, and felt a rush of something like pride. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, bought with my own money, not Chloe's, not anyone else's. I didn't need her anymore. Then the call started. I'd only had the phone a day when it buzzed in my pocket while I was elbow deep in suds. I wiped my hands on my apron and pulled it out. Chloe's number flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped. I let it ring, watching it like it might bite me, until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. Her voice came through, soft and shaky, like she'd been practicing what to say. Mike, where are you? We waited for you. It was just a joke. We're so worried. Please call me back. I stood there, staring at the sink, the water still running. Worried? They'd left me in the middle of nowhere with nothing. If they'd waited, they'd have come back by now. The phone buzzed again, Stephanie this time. I hit play on her voicemail, and her tone was totally different, all smug and casual. Come on, dude. You have to admit, it was hilarious. Call us back, all right. Hilarious. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles went white. That's what I was to them. A punchline. A story to laugh about over drinks at the lake house. More calls came after that. A flood of them. Chloe again. Then Lauren. Then Stephanie. Piling up with texts and voicemails. We miss you. Where'd you go? This isn't funny anymore. I scrolled through them all, my chest tight, my head spinning. Chloe's words kept echoing. Fake concern. Fake tears. She didn't care. None of them did. I sat on my cot that night, the shelter quiet except for the creak of springs and the hum of the heater. The phone glowed in my hand, their messages lighting up the screen. I listened to Chloe's first one again, then Stephanie's, then one from Lauren that was just her giggling before it cut off. My thumb hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to dial Chloe, to scream at her, to ask why she'd done this. But what would it change? She'd just laugh it off, or cry and make me feel guilty, like she always did. I'd spent years swallowing their crap, smiling through it because I thought that's what a good husband did. Not anymore. I went through the list. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, and blocked every single one. My fingers shook a little as I did it, but once it was done, the phone went silent. No more buzzing, no more lies. I leaned back against the wall, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It felt like cutting a rope I'd been tangled in for years. They couldn't reach me now. They didn't get to decide how this ended. I did. The next day, I went back to the diner like nothing had happened, plunging my hands into the dishwater, letting the heat burn away the last of their voices in my head. Jacqueline noticed something was off, though. You're quiet today, she said, tossing me a rag to wipe down the counter. Trouble. I shrugged, not wanting to get into it. Just sorting some stuff out. She snorted. Long as it don't mess with my kitchen, sort of way. I smirked at that. She didn't care about my drama, just the job. It was refreshing. Roy checked in later, handing me a paper with a case number for my ID. Coming along, he said. You holding up? I nodded. Yeah, better than I thought. He clapped me on the shoulder and left me to it. By the end of the week, I'd saved enough to buy a second-hand jacket from the shelter's donation pile. Nothing fancy, but it kept the chill off. I walked back to my cot each night, The prepaid phone silent in my pocket and felt lighter. Chloe and her friends were gone, cut out like a bad habit. I didn't need their apologies or their excuses. I had work, a bed, a plan, small things, but they were mine. The ache was still there, sure, the sting of betrayal, but it was fading. Every dish I scrubbed, every dollar I tucked away, I was building something new, something they couldn't touch. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without dreaming of her. I'd been at the diner for months now, and things were starting to feel steady. Not perfect, but steady. The shelter was still my home, but I'd saved enough to move into a tiny studio above a laundromat in Grand Junction. It wasn't much, just a single room with a lumpy mattress, a hot plate, and a bathroom so small I could barely turn around in it. But it was mine. No more cots, no more snoring strangers, just a key in my pocket and a door I could lock. Jacqueline had seen me busting my tail at the diner and bumped me up to prep cook, which meant more hours and a little more cash. I'd chop onions and peel potatoes in the back, the rhythm of the knife keeping my hands busy and my mind quiet. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was earning something real. The nights were still tough, though. I'd lie on that creaky mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and Chloe would creep into my head. I'd see her smile, hear her laugh, not the mean one she used with her friends, but the soft one she'd give me back when things were good, back before I became her punching bag. I'd wonder what she was doing, if she missed me, if she even cared. The loneliness hit hard sometimes, a cold weight in my chest that wouldn't go away. But then morning would come, and I'd drag myself out of bed, pull on my jacket, and head to the diner. No fear of her judgment, no cruel jabs from her friends. Just me, free to breathe, free to be. One night, after a long shift, I was messing around with my prepaid phone, bored and restless. I kept it simple, no contacts, no ties to the past, but curiosity got the better of me. I made a fake social media account, just a random name and no picture, and looked her up. Chloe's profile popped up, still public, still full of her perfect little life. There were pictures from the lake house trip, her and Stephanie posing by the water, Isla grinning with a drink in her hand. Then I saw it, a post about me. It was a photo of us from years ago, smiling at some picnic, and her caption hit me like a slap. Missing my love. I pray he finds his way back to me. I stared at it, my thumb frozen on the screen. Missing me? She hadn't even gone back for me. She'd driven off and left me to rot. I almost laughed, right there in that dingy apartment, the sound bouncing off the bare walls. It was so fake, so Chloe, turning herself into the victim, like I'd wandered off on my own instead of being abandoned. I scrolled through the comments, Stephanie saying, "He'll turn up, don't worry." Lauren chiming in with, "Sending you hugs." And my stomach turned. They were all in on it, playing this game like I was the bad guy. I clicked off the phone and tossed it onto the mattress, running my hands through my hair. She hadn't changed. None of them had. But I had. I wasn't the guy in that picnic photo anymore, the one who'd grin and take it while they tore me down. I was someone else now, someone they didn't know. The next day at the diner, I was quieter than usual, still chewing on what I'd seen. Jacqueline noticed, of course, she always did. "You look like someone kicked your dog," she said, sliding a plate of fries my way during a slow moment. I shrugged, picking at the food. Just thinking too much. She raised an eyebrow, her tattooed arms crossed. "About what? That ex of yours?" I froze, surprised she'd guessed it. I'd never told her the whole story, just bits and pieces. "Yeah," I admitted. "Saw something online. She's acting like she's the one who got hurt." Jacqueline snorted, loud and sharp. "Sounds like a real piece of work. Good riddance, kid." I nodded, managing a small smile. She was right. Good riddance. Work kept me grounded. I'd dice vegetables, flip burgers when the cook needed a hand, wipe down counters, anything to keep moving. The diner had its regulars, folks who'd nod at me or leave a couple bucks on the table, and that felt good, like I was part of something. My hands were calloused now, my arms stronger from hauling crates and scrubbing pans. I'd catch my reflection in the diner's glass doors sometimes, tired eyes, messy hair, but a guy who was making it, one day at a time. Chloe's post faded from my mind, replaced by the clatter of plates and Jacqueline's gruff voice calling out orders. I stopped checking her social media after that. Didn't need to. Whatever she was saying, whatever story she was spinning, it didn't matter. I had my studio, my job, my life, Small, sure, but growing. The loneliness still came around, especially on quiet nights when the laundromat downstairs hummed and rattled, but it wasn't as sharp anymore. I'd wake up to the smell of detergent drifting through the floorboards, pull on my boots, and head out into the cold morning air. No one was waiting to mock me. No one was rolling their eyes at my every word. I could just be Mike, plain, simple Mike, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, not sinking in quicksand. Freedom wasn't loud or flashy. It was this, my key, my paycheck, my choice. And I wasn't giving it back. I'd been living above the laundromat for a while now, settling into a routine that felt like mine. Work at the diner, save my cash, sleep in my own space. The days blended together, but they were good days, steady ones. Then she walked in, Sienna. She started coming to Jacqueline's diner twice a week, always in the same booth by the window, always with a stack of textbooks and a pen in her hand. She was a med student, I figured, from the way she'd mutter medical terms under her breath while scribbling notes. Her order never changed. Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, and she'd barely look up when I brought it over. I'd watch her sometimes, amused at how she'd get so lost in her studying that her fork would hover halfway to her mouth for a full minute before she noticed. I don't know why I started messing with her. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I just wanted to see if she'd crack a smile. I'd swap out my name tag with random names I'd make up, Bob one day, Steve the next, Carl after that, just to see if she'd catch it. She didn't at first, too buried in her books, but one morning, I walked over with Rusty pinned to my shirt, and she finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the tag, then back to my face. "Your name tag is wrong," she said, her voice quiet but firm, like she was diagnosing me. I grinned, caught off guard. "Is it?" I shot back, even though it was. My real name was Mike, and she'd never asked. She smirked, just a little, and went back to her notes. That was it, our first real moment, and it stuck with me. Work kept me busy, but Sienna became the highlight of my week. She'd show up, order her usual, and I'd find excuses to swing by her table, refill her coffee, clear her plate, ask if she needed anything. She'd nod or mumble a thanks, but that smirk stayed in my head, like a challenge. One day, she came in looking frazzled, her hair messy, her books heavier than usual. "Rough night?" I asked, setting her coffee down. She sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Exams. I haven't slept in 2 days." I nodded, not pushing it, but I slipped an extra hash brown onto her plate when she wasn't looking. She noticed, glanced up at me, and said, "You're sneaky." I just shrugged. "Gotta keep you awake somehow." Our first date wasn't even planned. She came in one evening, all dressed up, jeans and a nice top, not her usual sweatshirt, and told me her friends had bailed on a reservation at some fancy pizza place across town. "I'm not wasting it," she said, half to herself, then looked at me. "You free?" I was wiping down the counter, my shift almost over, and Jacqueline was in earshot. "Go on, kid," she barked, waving me off. "You're no use to me moping around." So I went. We split a pepperoni pizza and a pitcher of soda, and she laughed, really laughed, when I told her about the name tag thing. "I knew it wasn't Rusty," she said, her eyes bright. "You're not that old." We talked all night, about her med school stress, my diner gig, dumb stuff like favorite movies. It was easy, natural, like we'd known each other forever. 6 months later, she moved into my little studio. It was cramped. Her books took up half the space, and we'd trip over each other making dinner on that tiny hot plate, but I didn't care. She'd study late, her lamp glowing while I slept, and I'd wake up to her muttering anatomy terms in her sleep. It was weirdly comforting. A year after that, we got a bigger place together, a real apartment with a kitchen and a couch that didn't smell like bleach. Sienna was different from Chloe. She didn't mock me, didn't make me feel small. When I'd doubt myself, she'd just say, "You've got this." And somehow, I'd believe her. We'd cook together, watch old TV shows, argue over who left the dishes in the sink. It was simple, but it was ours. Meanwhile, Chloe wouldn't let go. She'd started emailing me, found my address somehow, probably from an old bill or something. The first one came a few weeks after Sienna moved in, popping up on my phone while I was chopping peppers at the diner. "Mike, I just want to know you're okay," it read. "I miss you." "We all do." I stared at it, my knife hovering over the cutting board. "Miss me?" She'd left me at a gas station with nothing, laughed about it with her friends, and now she missed me? I deleted it without replying. More came after that, some short, some long, all dripping with that fake sweetness she'd mastered. I messed up, I know. Please talk to me. I saw your grandma. She's worried. I'd read them, feel that old ache in my chest, then hit delete. Sienna caught me once, frowning at my phone. Who's that? She asked. Nobody, I said, and she didn't push. She didn't need to. I wasn't going back. Life with Sienna was good, better than I'd thought I deserved. The diner was humming, my hands were steady, and Chloe's emails were just noise I could tune out. I'd built something new, something solid, and every day with Sienna proved it. She'd tease me about my cooking, I'd laugh at her terrible singing, and we'd fall asleep tangled up on that secondhand couch. Chloe could write all she wanted. I didn't know her a damn thing. My world was here now, with Sienna, and I wasn't letting go. I stood in the kitchen of Jacqueline's diner, flipping a burger on the grill, the sizzle filling the air as grease popped against my apron. Things had been good. Better than good, really. Sienna and I were settled in our new apartment, a step up from the cramped studio above the laundromat. It had a real bedroom, a stove that didn't smoke, and a window that let in actual sunlight. Life felt solid, like I'd finally climbed out of the hole Chloe and her friends had left me in. Work was steady too. I'd been at the diner long enough that Jacqueline trusted me with more than just dishes and prep. She'd started leaning on me, barking less and nodding more when I got things done right. That day, though, she called me over to the counter during a slow stretch, her sharp eyes locked on me like she had something big to say. Mike, she said, wiping her hands on a rag, you're not half bad at this. I smirked, thinking she was joking, but her face stayed serious. I'm opening a second spot across town, smaller joint, but mine. Need someone to run it. You in? I froze, spatula in hand, the burger sizzling behind me. Me? Run a diner? I'd gone from scrubbing plates to cooking, sure, but managing a whole place? You serious? I asked, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She snorted. Do I look like I'm kidding? You've got the chops. Work hard, don't steal, don't whine. Say yes or no. My head spun. A year ago, I'd been dumped at a gas station with nothing. Now I was getting offered this. I almost said no, convinced it was some trick, like Chloe's pranks all over again. That night, I sat on our couch, Sienna's and mine, staring at the TV without really watching it. She came home from a late study session, dropping her bag by the door, and saw me just sitting there. What's up? She asked, kicking off her shoes. I told her about Jacqueline's offer, my voice low, like saying it out loud might jinx it. She wants me to run her new diner. Me in charge. Sienna plopped down next to me, her knee brushing mine. And you're thinking about turning it down? She said, reading me like always. I shrugged, rubbing my neck. I don't know. What if I screw it up? She grabbed my hand, her grip firm. You're already running that place half the time, helping with orders, fixing stuff when she's yelling at someone else. Just make it official. You've got this. Her words hit me hard, like a shove I didn't know I needed. She didn't doubt me, not for a second, and that felt new, strange, good. Chloe would have laughed, said something like, you? A boss? And her friends would have piled on. But Sienna just looked at me, steady and sure, and I nodded. Okay, I'll do it. She smiled, that small one I loved, and leaned her head on my shoulder. Good. Now stop moping. We've got dishes to do. I laughed, the weight lifting a little, and we washed plates together, her humming some off-key song while I splashed water at her. The next day, I told Jacqueline yes. She grunted, like she'd expected it, and handed me a set of keys. Don't burn it down, she said, then went back to counting cash. The new diner was a hole-in-the-wall spot. 10 tables, a counter, a kitchen barely big enough for two, but it was mine to run. I started the next week, setting up schedules, ordering supplies, cooking when the line got slammed. It was chaos at first, waitresses forgetting orders, me burning a batch of fries, but I figured it out. Sienna was right. I'd been doing this stuff already, just without the title. The place started humming, regulars trickling in, and Jacqueline even stopped by once, nodding like she approved. Not bad, kid, she said, and I felt taller than I had in years. Then Chloe's email came. I was at the new diner, checking inventory on my phone, when it popped up. Mike, your grandmother's been asking about you. Please let us know you're alive. My gut twisted. Grandma. She'd always been sweet, sending me cards even after I married Chloe. But Chloe bringing her up now? It was a cheap shot, a hook to reel me back in. I pictured her typing it, fake tears in her eyes, trying to guilt me like always. I deleted it, my thumb slamming the screen harder than it needed to. She didn't get to use grandma against me, not after what she'd done. I hadn't called home in a while, sure, but I'd fixed that myself, not through her. I threw myself into the diner after that, keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander. The place was picking up, truckers stopping by, locals chatting me up like I was one of them. I'd come home to Sienna studying at our table, her books spread out, and she'd ask how it went. Good, I'd say and mean it. We'd cook dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta or burgers, and talk about her classes, my day, the future. Chloe's emails kept coming, piling up in my trash folder, but I didn't open them. She was a ghost, a shadow I could ignore. My life was here. The diner, Sienna, the keys in my pocket. I'd been abandoned once, left to figure it out, and I had. Now I was building something better, something they couldn't touch. Every night, I locked up the diner, drove home to Sienna, and felt like a man who'd finally found his footing. I was flipping eggs in the kitchen of my third diner, the one on the edge of town, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The morning rush was in full swing, truckers hollering for coffee, waitresses darting between tables, and I almost ignored it. 15 years had turned me into a different man. Sienna and I were married, 2 kids tearing up our house, 3 diner locations keeping me busy. Life was good, loud, full, nothing like the empty shell I'd been when Chloe left me at that gas station. I wiped my hands on my apron, pulled out my phone, and saw it. A LinkedIn notification. Someone viewed your profile 27 times today. My stomach did a little flip. I didn't use LinkedIn much, just a basic page with my name, the diners, a blurry photo Sienna made me take. But 27 times? That wasn't normal. I tapped it open, the grill hissing behind me, and there she was, Chloe. Her name hit me like a cold splash of water, right there on the screen, tied to some company I didn't care about. 27 views in one day. She'd been digging through my life, over and over. I set the phone down, my hands gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. 15 years, and she was back, creeping in like a shadow I thought I'd shaken off. I flipped the eggs, barely watching, my mind racing. What did she want? Why now? I'd blocked her emails years ago, ignored her guilt trips, built a whole world without her. But here she was, poking around, silent but loud in my head. The diner smelled like bacon and syrup, the clatter of plates keeping me grounded. I plated the eggs, handed them off to a waitress, and tried to focus. Coffee needed refilling, hash browns were burning, but Chloe's name stuck with me. I pictured her sitting somewhere, clicking my profile, seeing the diners, maybe even the old job at Jacqueline's I'd listed. Did she know about Sienna? The kids? I hadn't posted much, just enough to look legit, but 27 views meant she was looking hard. I wiped my forehead, sweat mixing with the heat, and grabbed my phone again. Her profile stared back. Chloe, older now, hair cut short, a tight smile in her picture. Consultant, it said. I didn't read more. Didn't want to. I stepped into the back, a tiny storeroom with shelves of flour and canned goods, and leaned against the wall. My heart was thumping too fast, like I'd run a mile. 15 years, 2 kids, a wife, a business, and she could still rattle me. I hated that. I'd worked so hard to bury her, to forget the gas station, the laughter, the way she'd made me feel like nothing. Now she was back, not even saying anything, just watching. Was she jealous? Mad? Desperate? I ran my hands through my hair, pacing the cramped space. Part of me wanted to message her, "What's your deal?" But I stopped myself. That's what she'd want. Me reaching out, giving her a crack to slip through. I went back to the grill, threw myself into the rush, cooking, pouring, wiping down tables when the waitresses got swamped. The regulars nodded at me. Some guy asked for extra ketchup, and I kept moving, kept my hands busy. But she was there, in the back of my mind, those 27 views like an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't tell Sienna when I got home that night. She was on the couch, folding laundry, the kids upstairs yelling about some game. Busy day? She asked, glancing up. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile, kissing her forehead. Same old. She didn't push, just handed me a pile of socks to sort, and I sat there, folding, pretending everything was fine. The house was warm, Smelled like dinner. Chicken and rice, Sienna's go-to, and the kids tumbled down, begging for dessert. I laughed, said no, felt normal for a minute. But Chloe lingered, a ghost I couldn't shake. I didn't check LinkedIn again, didn't need to see if she'd looked more. 27 was enough. I helped Sienna with the dishes, her hip bumping mine, and tried to let it go. My life was here, 2 kids fighting over the last cookie, a wife who didn't laugh at me, diners I'd built from nothing. Chloe couldn't touch that, not really. Still, I went to bed with her name in my head, staring at the ceiling while Sienna slept beside me. The next day, I was at the first diner, pouring coffee, when my phone buzzed again. I didn't look, just shoved it deeper in my pocket. If it was her, I didn't want to know. I'd spent years locking her out, and now she was knocking, quiet but steady. I focused on the work, grill, counter, cash register, kept my hands moving, my voice steady. She was out there, somewhere, but I was here, standing tall. Whatever she wanted, whatever game she was playing, I wasn't biting. Not yet. Not ever, if I could help it. I was wiping down the counter at the original diner, the one Jacqueline first hired me for, when the door jingled and they walked in, Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla. It was 3 days after those LinkedIn alerts, and I'd been on edge, half expecting something like this. The breakfast rush had just died down, leaving a handful of regulars sipping coffee, the air thick with grease and burnt toast. I saw them before they saw me. Chloe's short hair catching the light, Stephanie's swagger still there. Isla hunched like she wanted to disappear. My gut twisted, hands freezing on the rack. 15 years since they'd ditched me at that gas station, and now they were here, in my diner, my turf. I didn't move, just watched them pick a booth by the window and sit, their voices low but familiar. I could have stayed back, let the waitress handle it, but something pulled me out there. Maybe anger, maybe just needing to see it through. I grabbed a pot of coffee, more for something to hold than anything else, and walked over. Chloe spotted me first, her eyes going wide, her mouth dropping open. "Oh my God, it's you," she said, her voice shaky, like she hadn't rehearsed it. Stephanie leaned back, smirking like always. "Hey, look at you, big shot." Isla glanced up, then down fast, her hands fidgeting with the menu. I stood there, coffee pot in hand, looking at them. Older, worn, desperate in a way I didn't expect. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping it short, my voice harder than I felt. Chloe shifted, leaning forward, her fingers twisting together. "Mike, can we talk? Please." I didn't sit, didn't soften. "I'm working. Talk." She swallowed, glancing at Stephanie for backup, then started. We need your help." It spilled out. Her life had crashed. Her artsy little business went under. Her marriage, some guy I didn't know, fell apart, and she was broke, begging now. Stephanie jumped in, casual like it was no big deal. "You're doing all right? 3 diners? We just need a hand, for old times." Isla nodded, barely audible. "Just a little help." I listened, letting it sink in. Chloe's sob story, Stephanie's charm, Isla's guilt. They'd planned this, tracked me down, thought I'd roll over. I stood there, coffee pot still hot in my grip, watching them squirm. Chloe's eyes got wet, Stephanie's smirk twitched, Isla shredded the edge of her menu. I remembered her LinkedIn stalking, 27 views, then showing up here, thinking I'd cave because I used to. "Wait here," I said, turning away. I walked to the office, a cramped box with a desk and a stack of receipts, my boots heavy on the floor. They wanted money. After leaving me with nothing, laughing about it, they thought I'd just hand it over. I sat down, the chair creaking, and stared at the wall. My hands shook a little, not from fear, from anger. I could have yelled, thrown them out, but I didn't. I grabbed an envelope, wrote a check, and headed back. They were still there, whispering, heads snapping up when I walked over. I dropped the envelope in front of Chloe, watching her fingers snatch it up, her face lighting up for a second. She opened it. $73.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction back home, 15 years ago. Her smile crashed, her breath catching. Stephanie grabbed it, glaring. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. I leaned in, my voice low, steady. "That's what it would have cost me to get back to you that day. I didn't. You don't get more than that." Chloe's mouth opened, no sound coming out. Stephanie shoved the check at me. "You're a jerk, Mike. After everything." I cut her off. "After everything? You left me. You laughed. This is me being generous." Isla flinched, her hands balling up, but she didn't speak. I straightened, looking at them. Chloe pale, Stephanie fuming, Isla shrinking. "It's time to leave," I said, loud enough for the diner to hear. "Don't come back." I turned, walked to the counter, my heart pounding but my steps sure. The waitress hovered, unsure, but I waved her off. "They're done," I said, grabbing a rag to wipe my hands. They sat there a minute, stunned, then scrambled up, Chloe shoving the envelope in her purse, Stephanie muttering, Isla trailing behind. The door jingled shut, and the diner went back to normal, coffee pouring, forks clinking, like they'd never been there. I stood behind the counter, pouring myself a cup, my hands steady now. They'd come begging, thinking I'd bend, and I'd shut them down. It wasn't loud or messy, just cold, final. I sipped the coffee, bitter on my tongue, and watched the regulars chat, oblivious. Chloe's tears, Stephanie's anger, they didn't matter. I'd given them what they'd given me, just enough to walk away. The diner hummed around me, my diner, my life, and they were gone. I finished my shift, locked up, and drove home, the weight lifting with every mile. They'd tried, and they'd lost. That was it. I leaned against the diner's front window, the glass cold against my arm, watching Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla out in the parking lot. They'd just stormed out after I handed them that $73.50 check. Bus fare from Grand Junction, nothing more. And now they were at it, arguing like kids caught stealing. Stephanie was loud, her hands slashing the air, her face twisted up like she wanted to hit something. Chloe stood there, the envelope crumpled in her fist, staring at the ground, her shoulders hunched. Isla hung back, her arms crossed tight, looking like she might bolt or cry. Maybe both. I couldn't hear them through the window, but I didn't need to. They'd come in begging, thinking I'd cave, and I'd sent them packing. Now they were unraveling, and I just watched, feeling nothing. The sun was low, painting the lot orange, their shadows stretching long across the gravel. Stephanie jabbed a finger at Chloe, her mouth moving fast, probably blaming her for dragging them here, for screwing it up. Chloe shook her head, slow and tired, then shoved the check into her purse like it was trash. Isla shifted, glancing at the diner, her eyes catching mine for a second before darting away. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, my coffee mug cooling on the counter behind me. They could fight all day out there. It didn't touch me. I'd given them what they deserved, closed the book on 15 years of their garbage, and that was that. I turned away, grabbing the mug and taking a sip. Cold now, bitter, but I didn't care. The diner was quiet, just a couple of regulars lingering over pie, the jukebox humming some old tune. I wiped down the counter, slow and steady, letting the rag soak up the day. The waitresses buzzed around, clearing tables, shooting me quick looks but keeping their mouths shut. They knew something had happened. Those three walking in, me walking out with that envelope. But I didn't explain. "You good, Mike?" one asked, stacking plates. "Yeah," I said, short and sharp, and went back to wiping. I didn't want their questions, didn't want to drag it out. Chloe and her crew were gone, and I was done. Driving home, the truck's engine growled under me, the road dark except for my headlights cutting through. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind stuck on that scene. Chloe's face when she saw the check, Stephanie's snarl, Isla's silence. It should have felt good, shutting them down, and it did, mostly. But there was this itch, a little nag I couldn't shake. They'd looked desperate, broken, Chloe especially, with her sob story about her life falling apart. 15 years ago, I'd have cared, run after them, tried to fix it. Now, I just watched them leave. The house came into view, lights on, Sienna's car in the drive, and I let out a breath. This was real, my family, my life, not them. I walked in, kicking my boots off by the door, the smell of leftover lasagna hitting me. Sienna was at the kitchen table, papers spread out, a pen in her hand, grating again, probably. The kids were upstairs, their voices muffled, likely in bed but not asleep. She looked up, her glasses low on her nose. "Hey," she said, soft, then tilted her head. "You okay?" I nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her, my hands flat on the table. "They came by," I said, keeping it simple. Her eyebrows lifted, but she waited. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla asked for money. I gave them bus fare and told them to go. She set her pen down, leaning back, her eyes steady on mine. "Bus fare?" she asked, a little smile tugging her lips. I told her, $73.50, the exact cost to get back from Grand Junction all those years ago. How Chloe's face fell, how Stephanie snapped, how I walked away. Sienna listened, her hand resting on the table, calm like always. When I finished, she reached over, her fingers brushing mine. They can't take anything from you that you don't give them, she said, her voice firm, quiet. I looked at her, those words sinking in, and nodded. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. She squeezed my hand, then went back to her papers, leaving me sitting there, the weight lifting a little. She didn't need to say more. She got it, got me, and that was enough. We ate leftovers later, just the two of us, the kids finally quiet upstairs. I poked at the lasagna, my head still half in the parking lot, Stephanie yelling, Chloe staring, Isla shrinking. It didn't matter what they said out there, who they blamed. They'd come for a handout, and I'd given them a mirror instead. Sienna didn't ask more, just talked about the kids, our son's math test, our daughter's new obsession with drawing cats. I smiled, nodded, let her pull me back to now. After, we cleaned up, her hip bumping mine at the sink, and I felt steady again. That night, lying in bed, Sienna's breathing slow beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The house creaked, the kids shifting in their rooms, and I replayed it. Those three in my diner, then out in the lot, falling apart. They couldn't touch this, my family, my diners, me. I'd shut the door, locked it tight, and they were on the other side, where they belonged. The itch was still there, faint, but fading. Sienna was right. They got nothing I didn't give, and I'd given them the end. I closed my eyes, the days slipping away, and slept hard, done with their ghosts for good. I stood in the kitchen of our house, stirring a pot of chili on the stove, the smell of spices filling the air. It had been weeks since Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla walked into my diner, since I handed them that $73.50 check and watched them argue in the parking lot. I hadn't seen them since, not a call, not an email, not even a whisper on LinkedIn. They were gone, really gone this time, and I felt it. A quiet that settled deep, like a storm finally passing. Life rolled on. Sienna grading papers at the table, the kids chasing each other around the backyard, the diners humming with regulars. It was mine, all of it, and they couldn't touch it. I'd stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next knock. The chili bubbled, steam rising, and I tasted it. Needed more salt, maybe a kick of pepper. Sienna glanced up from her stack of tests, her glasses slipping down her nose. Smells good, she said, smiling that small smile I loved. Better be. I shot back, grinning, and she laughed, soft and easy. The kids burst in from outside, our son waving a muddy stick, our daughter yelling about a bug she'd found. Out, both of you, wash up. I barked, pointing to the sink, and they groaned but obeyed, splashing water everywhere. It was chaos, loud and messy, but it was ours. Chloe's face, those tears she'd tried to sell me, faded a little more every day, replaced by this. Work was good too. I bounced between the three diners, flipping burgers, checking stock, joking with the waitresses. The regulars knew me now. Old Tom with his coffee, the trucker who tipped big, the lady who always asked for extra napkins. They'd nod, say, "Hey, Mike," and I'd nod back, feeling like I belonged. Jacqueline stopped by the first diner one morning. Her tattoos faded, but her glare still sharp. "You didn't screw it up," she said, looking around, then clapped my shoulder and left. High praise from her. I laughed to myself, pouring coffee for a table, and thought about how far I'd come, from a gas station nobody to this. I didn't check on Chloe anymore. No fake social media accounts, no late-night scrolls. I'd done that once, years back, seen her play the grieving widow, but now? I didn't need to know. She was out there, somewhere, living whatever life she'd made after her business tanked, her marriage crumbled. Stephanie, and Isla too, maybe still mad, maybe still blaming her. It didn't matter. They'd come begging, and I'd shut the door. That $73.50 check was the last thing I'd ever give them. Just enough to walk away, like they'd left me to do. I didn't feel bad, didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Sienna and I took the kids to the park that weekend, a crisp fall day with leaves crunching under our boots. Our son ran ahead, kicking a ball, while our daughter clung to my hand, pointing at every squirrel. Sienna walked beside me, her arm brushing mine, and we didn't say much, just watched, breathed, lived. I thought about Chloe for a second, her showing up, her voice cracking, and let it go. She couldn't take this from me, couldn't even come close. I'd built it all without her, despite her, and it was better than anything she'd ever offered. You're quiet, Sienna said, nudging me. Just happy, I replied, and she squeezed my hand, knowing I meant it. Back home, we ate the chili, too spicy, the kids complained, but they shoveled it down anyway. I sat at the table, watching them bicker over the last roll, Sienna rolling her eyes at their noise. This was it, the best revenge, if you could call it that. Not some big fight, not rubbing it in their faces, just living well, living real. Chloe wanted me to break, to crawl back, and I hadn't. I'd walked away from that gas station, from her, and kept going. Roy at the shelter, Jacqueline's diner, Sienna's laugh, these kids. Every step was mine, every piece earned. They'd lost, not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd stopped playing their game. The days kept rolling, school runs, diner shifts, quiet nights with Sienna on the couch. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Chloe was a memory, a shadow that couldn't reach me anymore. I'd see her sometimes, in a flash, her smirk, her tears, but it didn't stick. I'd turn the radio up, flip a burger, hug my daughter, and she'd fade. The diners thrived, the kids grew, Sienna and I argued over dumb stuff like whose turn it was to mow the lawn. It was simple, messy, perfect. I'd wake up early, make coffee, stand in our kitchen looking out at the yard, and feel it. Peace, deep and steady. One night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the porch, a beer in my hand, the air cool against my skin. Sienna came out, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside me. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice soft. I took a sip, staring at the stars. "Nothing," I said, then smiled. "Everything." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there, quiet, together. Chloe was gone, really gone, and I was here whole. The best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was this, right now, a life so good I didn't need to prove anything. I'd made it, and that was enough. My wife said, "If you don't trust me hanging out with my ex-husband every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be together." I replied, "You're absolutely right." Then I accepted the job transfer to London I'd been declining for her. When she texted, "What are you doing this weekend?" I sent a selfie from Heathrow Airport. My name is Marcus, and at 31 years old, I thought I had this whole adulting thing figured out. Spoiler alert, I absolutely did not. 3 years of marriage to Clara had given me a false sense of security, like those people who think they're invincible because they've never been in a car accident. We had what everyone calls the good life. You know, the kind that looks perfect on Instagram, but feels like watching paint dry in real time. Clara was 29, which in hindsight should have been my first red flag. Not because of her age, but because she still acted like she was 22 and discovering herself through bad decisions and overpriced coffee. But hey, love makes you stupid, and I was practically brain dead when it came to her. We had the whole suburban dream package, steady jobs that we complained about but never quit, a shared apartment that we pretended to love but secretly knew was overpriced, and those adorable 5-year plans that couples make when they're high on optimism and low on real-world experience. Everything was cruising along in that beautifully boring way that makes your parents proud and your single friends jealous. I should have known the universe was just setting me up for the cosmic punchline of my life. Because that's when Adrian decided to make his grand re-entrance into our perfectly choreographed existence. Adrian. Even his name sounds like the kind of guy who orders wine at Applebee's and acts like he knows what he's talking about. He was Clara's ex-husband. Yeah, you read that right. Ex-husband. Because apparently, my wife had been married before and thought mentioning it casually 6 months into our relationship was totally normal timing. Oh, by the way, I was married to this guy Adrian for 2 years, but it didn't work out because he was emotionally unavailable and had commitment issues. Classic red flag disguised as vulnerability, but I was too whipped to see it when Mr. Emotionally Unavailable decided to grace our little town with his presence again. Clara suddenly developed this overwhelming urge to catch up. And by catch up, I mean systematically replace every weekend activity we used to do together with Adrian-themed adventures. It started innocent enough. Saturday brunch at that overpriced cafe downtown where they serve $12 avocado toast and call it artisanal. Because nothing says just friends, like spending your Saturday morning staring into your ex-husband's eyes over Eggs Benedict. But of course, it didn't stop there. It never does it? Saturday brunch evolved into Sunday walks through the park, because Adrian was apparently going through some sort of existential crisis and needed Clara's unique brand of emotional support. You know, the kind that requires long, meaningful conversations while strolling past happy families and couples who actually spend weekends together. Then came the Friday movie nights, because poor Adrian was going through a rough patch and needed someone to hold his hand through the latest Marvel movie. Funny how his rough patch seemed to coincide perfectly with our date nights that I tried to be the understanding husband. Really, I did. I channeled every piece of marriage advice I'd ever ignored and attempted to trust my wife. But trust is a funny thing. It's like trying to ignore a mosquito buzzing around your head. You can pretend it's not there for a while, but eventually, you're going to get bit, and it's going to itch like hell. The signs were everywhere, but I was apparently fluent in denial. Clara started wearing this perfume she'd never worn for me. Something expensive and sultry that made our apartment smell like a department store. She'd spend an hour doing her hair for these casual friend meetings, styling it in ways that suggested these hangouts were anything but casual. And don't even get me started on the phone situation. My wife, who used to barely glance at her phone during our conversations, was suddenly giggling at text messages like a teenager with her first crush. The worst part? She laughed at her phone more than she laughed at my jokes. And let me tell you, my jokes are comedy gold. Okay, maybe comedy bronze, but still. When your wife finds her phone more entertaining than you, it's time to reevaluate some life choices. Enter the supporting cast of this tragicomedy. Lila, Clara's best friend, who had apparently appointed herself as the official cheerleader for this disaster in the making. Lila was one of those friends who gives terrible advice with complete confidence, like a GPS that's constantly recalculating but never actually gets you where you need to go. Marcus, she'd say with that condescending smile, you need to understand that exes can absolutely be just friends. It's actually really mature and healthy. Right, because nothing screams emotional maturity like spending every weekend with the person you divorced. On the other side, there was Jordan, my best buddy and the voice of reason I chose to ignore. Jordan had this amazing ability to raise his eyebrows in a way that said, "Dude, are you seriously not seeing this?" without actually having to voice his concerns. He'd give me that look every time I mentioned Clara's weekend plans, but being the good friend he was, he'd just tell me to keep cool and trust the process. The process, as it turned out, was my marriage slowly imploding while I pretended everything was fine. But I tried. God help me, I really tried to keep cool. I practiced the art of fake smiling when Clara would come home glowing from her friend dates. I bit my tongue when she'd spend an hour getting ready for coffee with Adrian. I even managed to nod along when she'd tell me about their deep conversations and shared memories, as if I was supposed to be happy that my wife was emotionally reconnecting with her ex-husband every weekend. The unease grew like a tumor in my chest, feeding on every canceled plan, every secretive phone call, and every time she chose Adrian over me. But I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was the problem, that maybe I needed to be more secure in my marriage. What I didn't realize was that my marriage was already over. I was just the last one to get the memo. The breaking point didn't come with some dramatic revelation or catching them in bed together like you see in the movies. No, it arrived on a perfectly ordinary Saturday morning with the subtlety of a freight train to the face. I was sitting at our kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold while I pretended to read the news on my phone, when Clara emerged from our bedroom looking like she was headed to a damn photo shoot. She'd done that thing with her hair again. You know, the effortless but actually took an hour look that she'd perfected for her Adrian dates. The perfume cloud hit me before she even entered the kitchen, and I swear I could practically see the cartoon stink lines wafting off her like she was Pepe Le Pew's dream girl. She was wearing this sundress that I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she claimed was too fancy for everyday wear, but apparently just fancy enough for casual Saturday hangouts with her ex-husband. "Morning, babe," she chirped, grabbing her purse and checking her reflection in the toaster. Because nothing says authentic relationship like using kitchen appliances as mirrors while your husband sits 3 feet away, that I looked up from my phone. where I'd been scrolling through the same article about cryptocurrency for the past 20 minutes without absorbing a single word. Let me guess, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Another emergency Adrian session? She paused, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe? Or annoyance that I dared to question her Saturday ritual. We're just getting coffee, Marcus. He's still going through that rough patch, remember? Right, the rough patch. Adrian's mysterious life crisis that apparently required more attention than a newborn baby and had been going on for 3 months now. I wondered what exactly constituted this rough patch. Was it his inability to find a decent apartment, his struggle with commitment issues, or maybe just the devastating realization that he'd let Clara slip away? My money was on the latter. Actually, I said, setting down my phone and looking directly at her. I was thinking we could try that new place downtown today. You know, the one with the bottomless mimosas you've been talking about for weeks. The suggestion hung in the air like a bad smell. Clara's face went through this amazing transformation. Confusion, then irritation, then that special kind of exasperation reserved for husbands who dare to want to spend time with their wives. She rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair of a teenager being asked to clean her room. Marcus, we've been over this like a million times. Adrian and I are just friends. We're adults. We can handle having a platonic relationship. Right? I nodded slowly. Platonic. Got it. That's why you're wearing the anniversary dress and enough perfume to knock out a horse. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, but her hand instinctively went to smooth down the dress. I always dress nicely when I go out. That was rich. The woman who wore sweatpants to the grocery store and considered putting on mascara a special occasion suddenly had standards for coffee dates with her ex. But I wasn't done yet. Call it masochistic, but I needed to hear her say it. So skip it today, I said simply. One Saturday. Stay home with your husband. We'll make pancakes, binge watch something terrible on Netflix, maybe even have actual conversations that don't revolve around Adrian's emotional well-being. You would have thought I'd asked her to donate a kidney. Her face contorted like I'd just suggested we murder puppies for fun. I can't just bail on him, Marcus. He's expecting me. And there it was. The truth wrapped up in a neat little package with a bow on top. Adrian was expecting her, not hoping to see her, not casually available if she happened to be free, but expecting her, like she was his employee, his therapy appointment, his guaranteed Saturday morning entertainment. What about what I'm expecting? I asked, and even I could hear the edge creeping into my voice. What about the fact that your husband might want to spend time with you occasionally? That's when she delivered the line that would change everything. The words that would replay in my head for weeks afterward like a broken record. She straightened up, put her hands on her hips, and looked at me with the kind of conviction usually reserved for courtroom dramas and political debates. If you don't trust me hanging out with my ex-husband every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be together. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, a car starting somewhere down the street, the hum of our refrigerator that I'd been meaning to fix for months. But mostly, I could hear the sound of my marriage officially ending, even though neither of us realized it yet that I looked at her for a long time, really looked at her. This woman I'd promised to love and cherish, who was now standing in our kitchen wearing my anniversary gift to meet another man while giving me ultimatums about trust. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. You're absolutely right, I said finally, my voice calmer than I felt. Her face twisted in confusion, like a computer trying to process conflicting commands. This clearly wasn't the response she'd been expecting. She'd probably anticipated tears, begging, maybe even a good old-fashioned fight where I'd storm out and she could text Adrian about what an unreasonable husband she had. But I meant it. Every single word. Because in that moment, sitting in our kitchen while she stood there ready to choose her ex-husband over me for the umpteenth time, I realized something profound. I was done. Not just with the Adrian situation, not just with the disrespect and the lying by omission, but with the entire charade of pretending this marriage was salvageable. You see, for months I'd been sitting on something that Clara didn't know about. Something big. My company had offered me a dream position, a transfer to their London office with a salary that would make our current financial situation look like pocket change. We're talking $130,000 a year, plus a fully furnished 3-bedroom flat overlooking the Thames, plus my own team to manage. It was the kind of opportunity that career counselors write fantasies about. I turned it down. Twice. Because every time I brought up the possibility of moving, Clara would shut it down faster than a nightclub at closing time. I can't leave my family, Marcus. My whole life is here. What about my job? What about my friends? What she really meant was, what about Adrian? Well, congratulations, Clara. You just solved that problem for me. That night, after she'd flounced out for her coffee date with her friend, I sat down at my laptop and composed the email that would change my life. The subject line was simple: London position, acceptance. The message was even simpler: I'll take it. When can I start? The response came back within 2 hours. 2 weeks. Welcome to the team. I smiled for the first time in months. The next morning, Clara woke up with that post-ultimatum regret that hits people like a hangover after a night of drunk texting their ex. You know the feeling, when you realize you've said something monumentally stupid and now you have to figure out how to backpedal without looking like a complete moron. Spoiler alert, there's no graceful way to do it. She shuffled into the kitchen where I was already dressed and drinking coffee, scrolling through apartment listings in London like a man who'd just discovered Christmas morning. The panic in her eyes was almost comical, like a cartoon character who'd just realized they'd walked off a cliff and were about to plummet into the canyon below. Marcus, she started, her voice doing that weird thing where it goes up at the end like she's asking a question even though she's making a statement. About yesterday, I think maybe we should talk. I looked up from my phone, where I'd been admiring a particularly nice flat in Canary Wharf. Talk about what exactly? Your coffee date with Adrian? How it went? Whether you two discussed our marriage over lattes and croissants. Her face went through that familiar color-changing routine. Pale to pink to red to that special shade of mortified that people get when they realize they've screwed up beyond repair. We didn't. Marcus, I think you misunderstood what I said yesterday. Oh, this was rich. The classic, you misunderstood me defense. As if the English language had suddenly become too complicated for my simple male brain to comprehend. I set down my phone and gave her my full attention, because this was going to be good. Really? Help me understand then. When you said, and I quote, if you don't trust me hanging out with my ex-husband every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be together. What exactly did you mean? Because to my admittedly limited understanding, that sounded like an ultimatum. She started doing that thing women do when they're caught in their own trap, the rapid-fire explanation that somehow makes everything worse. I was just frustrated, okay? You've been so jealous and suspicious lately, and I felt like you were trying to control who I could be friends with. I didn't mean we should actually break up. I just meant that trust is important in a relationship. Trust. The magic word that cheaters use when they want to gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. You're absolutely right, I said, standing up and grabbing my car keys. Trust is important. So is respect. And common sense. And not spending every weekend with your ex-husband while your actual husband sits at home like a chump. That's when the waterworks started. Clara's eyes filled up like a broken dam, and suddenly I was the villain in this story. Amazing how quickly the script flips when people realize there are consequences for their actions. Where are you going? She sniffled, like I was abandoning her to join the French Foreign Legion instead of just heading to work. London, I said simply. I accepted the transfer yesterday. I start in 2 weeks. The silence that followed was so complete, I could have heard a pin drop in the next zip code. Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her brain apparently unable to process the information I'd just delivered. You what? You can't. We never discussed. Marcus, you can't just decide to move to London without talking to me. The irony was so beautiful it almost brought a tear to my eye. The same woman who'd been making unilateral decisions about our weekends for months was suddenly concerned about couple communication. Funny thing about ultimatums, Clara. When you give someone an either-or choice, you have to be prepared for them to pick the option you don't want. I left her standing in our kitchen, still in her pajamas, looking like someone had just told her that Santa Claus wasn't real and the Easter Bunny was actually a registered sex offender. The next 2 weeks were like living in a reality TV show where the producers had decided to crank up the drama to 11. Clara went through all 5 stages of grief, sometimes cycling through them multiple times in a single day. It was exhausting to watch and even more exhausting to live through. First came denial. She kept insisting I was being dramatic, and that I'd come to my senses once I cooled down. She actually used air quotes when she said it, like my completely rational response to her ultimatum was some sort of emotional breakdown that would pass like a bad case of the flu. Then came anger. Oh boy, the anger. Clara turned into a one-woman demolition crew, slamming doors and throwing around accusations like confetti at a divorce party. I was abandoning her for money. I was running away from my problems. I was emotionally immature and couldn't handle her having male friends. The last one was particularly hilarious, considering her male friend was texting her at midnight and taking her to romantic restaurants every weekend. Bargaining was my personal favorite stage. Suddenly, Clara was full of compromises and solutions that had apparently never occurred to her during the 3 months of Adrian Fest. What if I only see him once a month? What if you come with us? What if we do couples therapy? Too little, too late, sweetheart. You don't get to renegotiate the terms after you've already blown up the contract. Depression hit when she realized I wasn't bluffing. I came home one day to find her sitting on our couch in the same clothes she'd worn the day before, surrounded by tissues like she was preparing for the world's saddest snowball fight. I can't believe you're really leaving me, she sobbed. How can you just throw away 3 years of marriage? I'm not throwing it away, I replied, continuing to pack my boxes with the efficiency of a man who'd finally found his purpose in life. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. But the real magic happened when I started packing her stuff too. See, here's the thing about our apartment that Clara had conveniently forgotten during her victim tour. The lease was in my name. Only my name. Because when we'd moved in together, Clara had insisted on keeping her parents' address for tax purposes, a cute little euphemism for, I want to dodge my civic responsibilities while still enjoying all the benefits of adult life. I packed her belongings with the care and attention of a professional moving service, organized everything neatly in boxes, and placed them by the front door like a thoughtful husband preparing for his wife's extended vacation. The look on her face when she came home to find her entire life summarized in cardboard containers was absolutely priceless. You can't kick me out, she screamed, apparently forgetting that she'd never legally moved in. This is my home too. Actually, I said, pulling out the lease agreement that I'd thoughtfully highlighted for her convenience. This is my home. You've been a guest. A very welcome guest for 3 years, but legally speaking, just a guest. And now the guest room is needed for other purposes. That's when she ran to our friends, because nothing says mature adult handling a relationship crisis like running to mommy and daddy, or in this case, to Jordan and Lila and anyone else who would listen to her tale of woe about how her heartless husband was abandoning her for filthy lucre. But here's where the story gets interesting. Remember Jordan, my best buddy with the expressive eyebrows? Well, Jordan had been doing some detective work of his own. The morning of my flight to London, I was feeling pretty damn good about life. My bags were packed, my new apartment keys were waiting for me across the pond, and I had that special kind of zen that comes from finally making a decision that doesn't suck. I was sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone, mentally calculating what time it would be when I landed. When the doorbell rang like the opening notes of a funeral march, I opened the door to find Clara flanked by her personal cavalry, her mother Teresa, and her younger sister Hannah. They looked like they were heading to either a funeral or an intervention, which, considering the circumstances, was probably accurate on both counts. Teresa was clutching her purse like it contained the nuclear launch codes, while Hannah looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else on planet Earth. Marcus, sweetheart, Teresa began, pushing past me into the apartment with the confidence of someone who'd clearly been planning this ambush for days. We need to talk. Oh, this was going to be good. I gestured them toward the living room, where my suitcases stood like silent witnesses to my impending freedom. Clara immediately started eyeing them like they were ticking time bombs, while Teresa positioned herself on the couch like she was conducting a boardroom meeting. This sudden move to London, Teresa continued, her voice dripping with that special brand of maternal concern that makes you feel like you're 12 years old and in trouble for breaking the neighbor's window. It's clearly a cry for help. Marcus, you're having some sort of breakdown, and instead of working through it like adults, you're running away. A cry for help. Right. Because accepting a dream job with a massive salary increase and escaping a marriage that had become more toxic than a Chernobyl picnic was obviously the behavior of someone who'd lost his marbles. I nodded thoughtfully, like I was really considering her psychological assessment. You're throwing your life away, she pressed on, warming up to her theme like a preacher hitting his stride. 3 years of marriage, all the memories you and Clara have built together, your home, your friends, all of it, gone, because you're having some sort of midlife crisis. Midlife crisis. I was 31. If this was my midlife crisis, it meant I was going to die at 62, which, considering how the last few months had gone, didn't sound entirely unreasonable. Hannah chimed in next, because apparently this was a tag team intervention. What about Clara? She demanded, shooting her sister a look that was equal parts sympathy and exasperation. You can't just leave her behind like she doesn't matter. She loves you, Marcus. She made a mistake, sure, but everyone makes mistakes. A mistake. Singular. As if Clara's 3-month emotional affair with her ex-husband was just an oops moment, like accidentally putting salt in her coffee or wearing mismatched socks. I was impressed by their ability to minimize the situation with such artistic flair. Clara herself had been unusually quiet during this opening salvo, probably because she was still processing the sight of my packed luggage. But now she stepped forward, tears already forming in her eyes like she was an actress who'd been preparing for this scene her entire life. Marcus, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to sound authentically heartbroken. Please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll stop seeing Adrian. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave me. And there it was, the performance I'd been expecting. The tearful confession, the promises to change, the desperate bargaining that comes when people realize they've pushed someone too far and the consequences are finally catching up with them. It might have been touching if it hadn't come about 3 months and 17 Adrian dates too late. I looked at the three of them, Teresa with her righteous indignation, Hannah with her misplaced loyalty, and Clara with her crocodile tears, and realized this was the perfect moment for the grand finale. The piece de resistance that Jordan had uncovered through his detective work. That's really touching, Clara, I said, pulling out my phone. But before we get too deep into the whole redemption arc, there's something I think everyone should see. I opened the screenshots that Jordan had forwarded to me and held up my phone so all three women could see them clearly. The messages were from Adrian's private gym chat group, where he'd been bragging to his workout buddies about his conquest like some sort of suburban Casanova. Book club is just code, read the first message. She's basically single now. 3 months of coffee dates, and she's already planning to leave her husband for me. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Teresa's face went white, Hannah's mouth dropped open, and Clara looked like someone had just told her that her lottery ticket was a fake. But wait, there was more. The next screenshot was even better. Her husband is such a cluck. Doesn't even know we've been hooking up in my car after every coffee date. She tells him we're just friends faced with tears of joy. That last message hit Clara like a physical blow. Her face went from white to green to red in about 3 seconds, cycling through colors like a broken traffic light. Teresa slowly sank back into the couch, her intervention speech apparently forgotten in the face of actual evidence. Context. Clara suddenly screamed, finding her voice again. You don't understand the context. Adrian was just. He was lying to his friends. He was making it sound like more than it was. Context. The refuge of the caught cheater. What context exactly? I asked mildly. The context where you've been lying to me for 3 months? The context where you've been meeting your ex-husband every weekend while telling me it was innocent? Or the context where you gave me an ultimatum yesterday about trusting you? Hannah was looking at her sister like she'd never seen her before, which was probably accurate. Teresa had gone completely silent, apparently realizing that her daughter's marriage problems were a bit more complicated than she'd originally thought. This is all taken out of context, Clara insisted, but her voice had lost all its conviction. She sounded like a defense attorney who'd just realized her client was guilty as sin, and the jury had already made up their minds. That I looked at each of them in turn, letting the weight of the evidence settle in the room like dust after an explosion. If you didn't mean the ultimatum, I said finally, you shouldn't have given it. That ended the discussion more effectively than a gavel in a courtroom. Teresa gathered her purse and stood up without another word, apparently deciding that strategic retreat was better than continued engagement. Hannah followed suit, shooting Clara a look that suggested there would be some very interesting conversations in the family group chat later. Clara made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Marcus, please. My flight leaves in 4 hours." I interrupted, checking my watch with the casual efficiency of a man who had places to be and lives to live. "Jordan's coming to pick me up in 20 minutes. You might want to call Adrian. I'm sure he'll be very comforting during this difficult time." As they filed out of my apartment, my former apartment, I should say, Clara turned back one more time. "What am I supposed to do now?" "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're very resourceful when it comes to making plans." The door closed behind them with a satisfying click, and I was alone with my suitcases and my freedom. Landing at Heathrow was like stepping into a different universe where the air actually tasted like possibility instead of disappointment and betrayal. I'd left behind the smoking wreckage of my marriage and walked straight into what felt like the opening scene of a movie where the protagonist finally gets his life together. The kind of movie where the guy starts off beaten down and ends up running through the airport in slow motion while inspirational music plays in the background. That MY new flat was everything the company had promised and more. Located in Canary Wharf, it overlooked the Thames with floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel like I was living inside a screensaver. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, and a view that made Clara's precious hometown look like a strip mall parking lot. Every morning, I'd wake up and look out at the river, watching the boats go by while drinking coffee that actually tasted good because it wasn't seasoned with resentment and marital dysfunction. The office was a revelation too. My colleagues were sharp, ambitious people who treated work like something they actually wanted to excel at, rather than just a way to pay for weekend drama sessions with ex-husbands. My new team was hungry, innovative, and refreshingly free of anyone named Adrian. For the first time in years, I was excited about Monday mornings instead of dreading them like a dental appointment. Meanwhile, back in the land of the free and home of the emotionally immature, Clara was apparently struggling with the concept that actions have consequences. According to my LinkedIn feed, she decided to take her grievances public, posting one of those vague social media manifestos that divorced people love so much. When someone you love abandons you without warning for money and career advancement, it really shows you who they truly are, she'd written, along with some inspirational quote about surviving betrayal and finding strength in solitude. The post was accompanied by a black and white photo of her looking pensively out a window, because nothing says authentic emotional pain like a carefully staged Instagram moment. But here's the thing about small towns and social media. Everyone knows everyone's business. And Clara had apparently forgotten that our entire social circle had been watching her Adrian show for the past 3 months. The comments on her post were absolutely brutal, in that passive-aggressive way that only Facebook comments can achieve. "Didn't you dump him for Adrian, though?" wrote Jessica from her yoga class. "Girl, we saw your stories every weekend with your friend," added someone named Brittany with about 17 crying laughing emojis. "Maybe check the dictionary definition of abandonment before using it," suggested Mike from my old office, who'd apparently been keeping track of the drama like it was his personal soap opera. The post disappeared within 6 hours, which was probably a new record for social media regret. But the internet is forever, and screenshots had already made their way into various group chats and private messages. Clara's attempt at controlling the narrative had backfired spectacularly, like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Then came the plot twist I hadn't seen coming, though in hindsight, it was inevitable. Adrian's girlfriend. Yes, he had a girlfriend this whole time, because of course he did, decided to reach out to me through LinkedIn. Her name was Sophie, and she was apparently everything Clara wasn't. Direct, honest, and refreshingly free of bullshit. "I think we need to talk," her message read. "Adrian has been lying to both of us." Sophie, it turned out, was a paralegal who'd been dating Adrian for 8 months. She believed his story about Clara being a crazy ex-wife who was obsessed with him and wouldn't leave him alone. According to Adrian's version of events, Clara was the one pursuing him, showing up uninvited and begging for reconciliation while he nobly tried to be there for her as a friend during her marital difficulties. The cognitive dissonance was almost impressive. Adrian had managed to convince his girlfriend that he was the victim of Clara's obsession while simultaneously bragging to his gym buddies about his conquest. It takes a special kind of sociopathic talent to spin two completely contradictory narratives with such confidence that I sent Sophie everything. Every screenshot Jordan had uncovered, every timeline detail, every piece of evidence that painted a very different picture from the one Adrian had been selling her. Her response was swift and decisive. She dumped him publicly on Facebook, posting all the screenshots along with a caption that would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. Ladies, when a man tells you his ex-wife is crazy and obsessed with him, ask yourself why he keeps meeting up with her every weekend. P.S. Adrian, your gym buddies can read these messages too now. Hope the book club was worth it. Within hours, book club had become Adrian's permanent nickname throughout our entire social circle. The guys at his gym started calling him that. His coworkers picked it up, and eventually it spread to every bar, restaurant, and coffee shop in town. Adrian couldn't go anywhere without someone asking about his book club activities, with a smirk that suggested they knew exactly what kind of books he'd been reading. The beautiful thing about small-town justice is that once you become a joke, you stay a joke. Adrian had gone from thinking he was Don Juan to being the town's official punchline, and there was literally nothing he could do about it. Every time someone saw him, they'd think about those screenshots and wonder what other lies he was telling. But the real karmic justice was watching Clara's reaction to Sophie's post. According to Lila, who'd apparently appointed herself as my unofficial intel source, Clara had tried to spin the whole thing as revenge from a jealous woman who couldn't handle the truth about her relationship. But the screenshots spoke for themselves, and Clara found herself in the impossible position of trying to deny evidence that everyone could see with their own eyes. The comments on Sophie's post were like watching a masterclass in public humiliation. Person after person shared their own Adrian stories. Apparently, this wasn't his first rodeo when it came to manipulating multiple women simultaneously. Clara wasn't his first victim, and she probably wouldn't have been his last if Sophie hadn't blown up his entire operation. An my personal favorite comment came from a woman named Rachel who wrote, Adrian told me the same story about his crazy ex-wife 2 years ago. Seems like all his ex-wives are crazy, which is statistically improbable unless the common denominator is him. Meanwhile, my life in London was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. The work was challenging and rewarding. My apartment was a sanctuary of peace and quiet, and I was finally sleeping through the night without wondering what my wife was texting about at midnight. I joined a local gym where nobody knew my name or my history, started exploring the city like a tourist in my own life, and discovered that happiness wasn't some elusive concept. It was just what happened when you remove toxic people from your daily routine. Every morning, I check my phone to see the latest updates from the American Disaster Channel, formerly known as my marriage. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, except the train had derailed months ago and was now just rolling down a hill, collecting more debris with every rotation. And the best part? I was 3,000 miles away, sipping excellent coffee and building a life that actually made sense. I thought I'd successfully escaped the gravitational pull of my former life's drama, like a rocket ship that had finally broken free from Earth's atmosphere and was cruising peacefully through the cosmic void. My London routine had become beautifully predictable. Excellent coffee, challenging work, Thames views, and a blissful absence of anything remotely resembling the Clara Adrian soap opera. I was living my best life, which apparently made me a prime target for the universe's twisted sense of humor. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I'd just finished a particularly satisfying meeting with my team about expanding into the European markets, when I walked out of our Canary Wharf office building and nearly choked on my coffee. There, standing next to the fountain like some sort of deranged tourist, was Clara, in London, 3,000 miles from where she was supposed to be, looking like she'd been sleeping in airport chairs and living off vending machine snacks. For a moment, I wondered if I was having some sort of stress-induced hallucination. Maybe the combination of jet lag and British weather had finally broken my brain, and I was now seeing my ex-wife's ghost haunting the financial district of London. But no, she was definitely real, complete with wrinkled clothes, disheveled hair, and that particular brand of desperation that only comes from making terrible life decisions and doubling down on them. She spotted me before I could duck back into the building and pretend I'd never left. Her face lit up with the kind of manic relief usually reserved for people who've been lost in the desert and just spotted an oasis. She waved at me like we were old friends running into each other at a high school reunion, rather than estranged spouses whose marriage had imploded in spectacular fashion. "Marcus," she called out, jogging toward me with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever who'd just seen a tennis ball. "I can't believe I found you. This city is huge." I stood there, coffee cup halfway to my lips, trying to process the sheer audacity of the situation. She'd flown across the Atlantic Ocean to ambush me outside my workplace like some sort of international stalker. The woman who couldn't be bothered to skip one Saturday coffee date with her ex-husband had apparently found the motivation to book a transatlantic flight and track me down in a city of 9 million people. "Clara," I said finally, my voice carrying all the enthusiasm of someone who'd just discovered a parking ticket on their windshield. "What the hell are you doing here?" By my less than enthusiastic reception, which was rich considering she'd shown up uninvited to my new life, like a walking reminder of every mistake I'd ever made. "I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice doing that wounded puppy thing that used to work on me back when I was stupid enough to care. "Can we get coffee? Please." Coffee. Of course. Because nothing said reconciliation like recreating the same activity that had destroyed our marriage in the first place. But something about her appearance, the dark circles under her eyes, the desperate way she was clutching her purse like a life preserver, made me curious about just how far she'd fallen since I'd left. Against my better judgment, which had clearly taken a vacation to somewhere more sensible, I agreed that we found a cafe near the office, one of those trendy London places that serve coffee in cups the size of soup bowls and charged accordingly. Clara ordered some complicated drink with multiple modifiers, probably trying to delay the inevitable conversation, while I stuck with a simple Americano because I had actual work to get back to. She looked rough. Really rough. The kind of rough that comes from weeks of poor decisions and sleepless nights. Her usually perfect hair was limp and lifeless. Her makeup was minimal and slightly smudged, and her clothes looked like she'd grabbed them off the floor of her childhood bedroom. This wasn't the polished, confident woman who'd been gallivanting around town with Adrian just a few weeks ago. "You look good," she said, which was probably true. London had been good to me. Better sleep, less stress, and the general glow that comes from not living with someone who makes you question your sanity on a daily basis. "The city suits you." "It does," I agreed, not bothering to return the compliment because honestly, she looked like she'd been hit by a truck carrying a load of regret and poor life choices. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, stirring it obsessively like she was trying to divine the future from the foam patterns. "Marcus, I need you to know that I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. I was confused and stupid, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Here we go, I thought. The grand apology tour, complete with self-flagellation and promises of redemption. I'd been expecting this conversation since the day I left, though I'd hoped it would come via email or text message rather than an in-person performance in a London cafe. I've been miserable since you left," she continued, her voice starting to crack around the edges. "Absolutely miserable. Nothing feels right without you. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't concentrate at work. I just keep thinking about all the ways I screwed up and wondering if there's any way to fix this. The thing about apologies is that they work best when they come before the relationship explodes, not after you've been caught red-handed and faced with consequences." Clara's remorse felt about as genuine as a $3 bill, timed perfectly to coincide with her realization that the grass wasn't actually greener on Adrian's side of the fence. "What happened with Adrian?" I asked, because I was genuinely curious about how that train wreck had concluded. Her face crumpled like a house of cards in a windstorm. It wasn't what I thought it would be. Once you left, he changed. He became demanding and possessive. He wanted me to move in with him immediately, quit my job, start having kids right away. It was like he thought he owned me or something. Fascinating. Adrian had gone from being the sensitive ex-husband who needed emotional support to a controlling nightmare the moment he thought he'd won. It was almost like he'd been putting on an act to steal someone else's wife, and once he'd succeeded, the mask had come off. Who could have possibly seen that coming? "So you broke up?" I pressed. "I tried to," she said, her voice getting smaller. "But he didn't take it well. He started showing up at my work, calling me constantly, telling everyone that I was just having commitment issues and would come around. It was like living with a stalker. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Clara had left a stable, respectful marriage for a man who turned out to be exactly the kind of person she'd accused me of being when I'd questioned her weekend adventures. Life has a funny way of teaching lessons to people who refuse to learn them the easy way. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and I actually meant it. Nobody deserves to be stalked or harassed, not even someone who'd made spectacularly poor choices. But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it. That's when she dropped the bombshell that made this whole conversation shift from pathetic to absolutely insane. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, tears starting to flow down her cheeks like a broken faucet. "And I don't know what to do." The pregnancy announcement hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud, and for a moment, I genuinely thought Clara had finally lost whatever tenuous grip on reality she'd been maintaining. I stared at her across the cafe table, watching tears stream down her face while she waited for my reaction, and all I could think was, this woman has officially gone off the deep end. And I started laughing. Not a cruel laugh, not a mocking laugh, but the kind of genuine, from-the-belly laughter that happens when someone tells you something so absurd that your brain can't process it any other way. Other cafe patrons started looking over at us, probably wondering if they were witnessing a proposal gone wrong or a mental breakdown in progress. "Pregnant," I repeated, wiping tears from my eyes. "That's your play here? Really? After everything that's happened, you're going with the fake pregnancy angle?" Her face went through several interesting color changes: confusion, hurt, anger, and then that particular shade of red that people get when they realize their lie has been called out publicly. "I'm not lying," she protested, but her voice had that hollow ring that bad actors get when they're overselling their performance. "Clara," I said, leaning back in my chair with the relaxed confidence of someone who holds all the cards. "We haven't had sex in over 2 months. I know this because I was there, or rather, I wasn't there, if you catch my drift. You were too busy with your book club activities to be interested in your actual husband." The silence that followed was deafening. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air, clearly trying to come up with some explanation that would make her story believable. But we both knew the math didn't work, and even Clara's creative relationship with the truth couldn't bend reality that far. "It could be from before," she whispered weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. "From before what? Before you decided that Adrian was more important than our marriage? Before you started spending every weekend playing house with your ex-husband? Be specific, Clara, because my calendar is pretty clear on when we stopped being intimate." She crumpled then, her whole fake pregnancy facade collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. The tears kept flowing, but now they seemed more genuine. Tears of frustration and desperation rather than manipulative crocodile tears. "I just needed you to care," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient cafe noise. "I thought if you believed I was pregnant, you'd want to work things out. You'd remember that you loved me once." And there it was, the truth wrapped up in the most pathetic package imaginable. Clara had flown 3,000 miles to lie to my face about being pregnant because she thought it would magically erase months of betrayal and manipulation. The woman who'd given me an ultimatum about trust was now trying to manipulate me with fake medical conditions. "I did love you once," I said quietly, and for the first time since she'd appeared outside my office, I felt something resembling sadness instead of just irritation. "I loved you for 3 years, but you only noticed when I stopped." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks in abstract patterns that would have been artistic if they weren't so pathetic. "So what now? You're just going to stay in London forever? Build a whole new life without me?" "That's exactly what I'm going to do," I confirmed. "Because that's what people do when their marriages end. They move on. They build better lives. They don't chase their ex-spouses across international borders with fake pregnancy stories." Clara flew home that night, defeated and broken in ways that almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. But sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford when it came to someone who'd spent months systematically destroying our marriage and then expected me to fix the consequences of her choices. The real entertainment started after she got back to the States. According to my network of involuntary correspondents, mostly Lila, who seemed to think I needed regular updates on the Clara show, my ex-wife had apparently learned nothing from our London conversation and was already back to her old patterns. 2 weeks after her failed reconciliation mission, Clara was posting Instagram stories from a CrossFit gym, featuring a suspiciously attractive trainer named Damien. Because nothing says, "I've learned from my mistakes," like immediately rebounding with another fitness professional who probably had the emotional depth of a puddle. The Instagram posts were a masterclass in self-deception. Clara was suddenly all about self-improvement and working on herself, posting inspirational quotes about how soulmates arrive when you're ready to work on yourself, and the universe brings you what you need when you need it most. The irony was so thick you could package it and sell it as a dietary supplement. Meanwhile, back in London, I was discovering that karma has a sense of humor that rivals any comedy writer. Adrian, apparently unable to learn from his previous humiliation, had somehow managed to land a job in London. Not just in London, but in the exact same corporate housing building where I was living. The universe was either testing my patience or setting up the world's most elaborate practical joke. I first encountered him in the lobby on a Tuesday morning, looking every bit as smarmy as I remembered, but now with the added bonus of seeming slightly desperate. He was with a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. All legs and cheekbones, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real consequences for poor decisions. "Marcus," Adrian called out, like we were old college buddies who'd lost touch over the years instead of the two corners of a love triangle that had exploded spectacularly. "What are the odds? Small world, right?" He introduced the young woman as Chloe, his girlfriend, with air quotes that suggested their relationship status was about as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Chloe looked at me with mild interest, clearly not knowing she was standing next to both the victim and the perpetrator of one of the Messier relationship disasters in recent memory. "Adrian," I nodded politely, because I'd learned that the best revenge is living well and not engaging with people who've already proven they're not worth your time. "Chloe, nice to meet you." By the end of that week, Chloe had dumped Adrian in the building's WhatsApp group chat after discovering his illustrious history with married women. Apparently, someone in the building had done their homework and shared the screenshots from Sophie's Facebook post. The message Chloe left was a thing of beauty. "Ladies of Riverside Court, Adrian Thompson is a serial cheater who specializes in breaking up marriages. He told me his ex-wife was crazy and obsessed with him. Turns out she was just married to someone else at the time. Also, he cries after sex. You've been warned." Within hours, everyone in our 200-unit building knew Adrian as that guy who cries after sex and breaks up marriages. His nickname evolved from Book Club to Cry Club, and residents started crossing the street to avoid him in the hallways. The beautiful thing about living in corporate housing is that gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi, and Adrian's reputation preceded him everywhere he went in the building. The concierge started smirking when he walked by. The gym staff exchanged knowing looks, and even the cleaning lady gave him side-eye that could have melted steel. Justice served with a side of public humiliation, exactly what the doctor ordered. Meanwhile, back in the good old US of A, Clara's relationship with Damien, the CrossFit trainer, was following the predictable trajectory of all rebound relationships that start with Instagram stories and end with restraining orders. According to my unofficial intelligence network, which consisted mainly of Lila's inability to keep her mouth shut and my own morbid curiosity, things had gone south faster than a penguin convention. The details, as relayed to me through a series of increasingly dramatic phone calls from Lila, were almost too perfect to be true. Clara had walked into the gym one evening for her regular session with Damien, probably expecting to work on her squats and her emotional baggage simultaneously, when she discovered him in the back room, helping his ex-girlfriend with some very creative stretching exercises. Now, I'm no fitness expert, but I'm pretty sure that particular position isn't recommended in any legitimate workout manual. Unless Damien was pioneering some revolutionary new form of couples yoga that involved significantly less clothing and significantly more betrayal than traditional exercise routines. She just stood there for like 5 minutes, Lila had breathlessly reported during one of her gossip update calls. Like, completely frozen. Damien and this other girl were so into their stretching session that they didn't even notice Clara watching them through the mirror. The image of Clara standing there, probably still holding her gym bag and water bottle, while watching her rebound relationship implode in real time was almost poetic. Here was a woman who destroyed her marriage for the thrill of cheating, only to discover that cheaters tend to cheat on everyone, not just other people's spouses. When Damien finally noticed Clara's reflection in the mirror, because apparently even mid-betrayal, he was still checking himself out. The ensuing confrontation was legendary enough to become gym folklore. Clara, channeling all the righteous indignation she'd never directed at herself, had apparently launched into a tirade about trust and respect that left everyone within earshot wondering if they were witnessing performance art or a psychological breakdown. "How could you do this to me?" she'd screamed, according to multiple eyewitness accounts that made their way through the local gossip network faster than a viral TikTok video. "I trusted you. I thought we had something real." The irony was so thick you could have used it as a protein shake. Clara, who'd spent 3 months sneaking around with her ex-husband while married to someone else, was suddenly an expert on trust and fidelity. The woman who'd given her actual husband an ultimatum about trusting her was now devastated to discover that her trainer boyfriend was exactly as trustworthy as she was. But wait, there's more. Because apparently the universe wasn't finished serving up justice with a side of poetic comeuppance. Clara, in her emotional distress over discovering that cheaters tend to be cheaters, had made the brilliant decision to text me about her revelation. At 3 a.m. London time, which was 10 p.m. her time, my phone buzzed with a message that I initially thought was some sort of drunk dial situation. "Now I know how you felt. I'm so sorry." That was it. No context, no explanation, just a sudden burst of empathy that had apparently taken her entire relationship with Damien to develop. I stared at the message for a few minutes, marveling at the fact that it had taken Clara experiencing betrayal firsthand to understand what betrayal felt like. Revolutionary stuff? Really? I left her on read. Not out of cruelty, but because what exactly was I supposed to say? "Thanks for finally developing basic human empathy after destroying our marriage. Congratulations on learning a lesson that most people figure out in elementary school." There was literally no response that wouldn't either encourage her delusion that we could reconcile or make me sound like a complete bastard. But karma, as it turns out, was just getting warmed up. Because while Clara was dealing with her trainer boyfriend's creative interpretation of physical fitness, she was about to discover that her past decisions had consequences that extended far beyond broken hearts and damaged pride. Remember Sophie? Adrian's ex-girlfriend who'd blown up his entire operation with those beautiful Facebook screenshots? Well, Sophie worked in the tax department for the city, and she'd apparently been doing some digging into Clara's living situation during their relationship. That it turns out that Clara's clever little scheme of using her parents' address to avoid city taxes while actually living in our apartment had caught someone's attention. Someone with access to employment records, lease agreements, and the kind of bureaucratic dedication that makes the IRS look friendly and approachable. The audit notice arrived on a Tuesday, according to Lila's breathless report. Clara had opened what she thought was junk mail to discover that the city wanted to have a very serious conversation about her tax obligations for the past 3 years. Specifically, they wanted to know why someone who was employed full-time in the city, had a city-issued parking permit, and was registered to vote at a city address had been claiming residency in her parents' suburban township. The amount owed was spectacular. 3 years of back taxes, plus penalties, plus interest, plus administrative fees that seemed to multiply like rabbits in springtime. The final tally came to just over $18,000, which might as well have been $18 million for someone who'd been living paycheck to paycheck, while spending her disposable income on weekend dates with her ex-husband. Clara's parents, bless their enabling hearts, had bailed her out financially. But they'd also forced her to move back into her childhood bedroom as part of the bailout agreement, because apparently even they had limits to how much financial irresponsibility they were willing to subsidize without consequences. The image of Clara, at 29 years old, moving back into her teenage bedroom with its faded boy band posters and high school trophies, was almost too perfect to be real. The woman who'd been so eager to play house with Adrian every weekend was now literally back in the house where she'd grown up, under her parents' roof and their rules. "She has a curfew now," Lila had reported with barely concealed glee. "Her mom makes her be home by 11 p.m. on weeknights and midnight on weekends. It's like she's 16 again, except with massive debt and a destroyed marriage instead of college applications and prom planning. Meanwhile, my life in London continued to improve in ways that made me question whether I'd accidentally stumbled into some sort of alternate universe where good decisions actually led to good outcomes. The promotion I'd been hoping for came through ahead of schedule, along with another salary increase that made my former American income look like pocket change. I was offered a permanent position with the company, complete with visa sponsorship and a clear path to British residency if I wanted it. But the real victory wasn't professional, it was personal. I'd met someone. Her name was Aoife, she was Irish, and she worked as an editor for a publishing house in Bloomsbury. Smart, funny, grounded, and refreshingly free of any desire to maintain relationships with her ex-boyfriends. When I told her the book club saga over dinner one evening, she'd laughed until tears streamed down her face. "Sounds like your wife was reading the wrong chapters," she'd said, and I'd known right then that this was someone I wanted to keep around. With Aoife, everything was easy. No drama, no secrets, no weekend disappearances or mysterious text messages. Just two adults building something real together, based on honesty and mutual respect. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. Every time Adrian saw me with Aoife in the building lobby or the local pub, I could see the jealousy eating him alive from the inside. The man who'd thought he was winning by stealing someone else's wife was watching me build something better with someone who actually deserved it. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of timing that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. While Clara was navigating the exciting world of parental curfews and tax debt, my life in London had evolved from escape disaster to actually thriving in ways I didn't know were possible. It's amazing how much your perspective shifts when you're not constantly wondering if your spouse is lying to you about where she's spending her weekends. Who knew that trust and honesty were such game changers in the happiness department? The promotion had come with perks that made my old life look like I'd been living in black and white, and someone had suddenly invented color television. Not just the salary bump, though going from comfortable to holy shit, I can actually afford things without checking my bank balance first, was pretty spectacular, but the whole package. Company car, expense account, and the kind of professional respect that comes from working with people who view competence as a baseline rather than an aspiration. My team was killing it in the European markets, which apparently made me some sort of corporate golden boy. The kind of success that would have made Clara proud back when she was capable of being proud of anything that didn't involve her ex-husband. Now it just felt like vindication. Proof that I'd made the right choice when I'd walked away from that toxic situation and chosen myself for once. But the real transformation wasn't professional. It was Aoife. Meeting her had been one of those random London moments that make you believe in cosmic timing. I'd been sitting in a pub in Bloomsbury after a particularly good day at work, reading emails and enjoying a pint, when this woman at the next table had started laughing at something on her laptop. Not polite chuckling, but the kind of genuine, infectious laughter that makes you want to know what's so funny that she'd been editing a manuscript. Something about a man who thought he could win back his ex-wife by pretending to be a food critic, and the absurdity of the plot had apparently struck her as hilarious. When she'd noticed me trying not to eavesdrop, she'd shared the joke, and we'd ended up talking until the pub closed. Aoife was everything Clara wasn't. Where Clara was all surface-level drama and emotional manipulation, Aoife was substance and authenticity. She said what she meant what she said, and had never once in our relationship made me wonder if she was secretly texting someone else while sitting next to me. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. She was also funny in ways that didn't require an audience or social media validation. When I told her the whole book club saga over dinner one night, she'd listened with the kind of attention that suggested she was actually interested in understanding what had happened, rather than just waiting for her turn to talk. "So let me get this straight," she'd said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Your ex-wife spent 3 months cheating on you with her ex-husband, gave you an ultimatum about trusting her, and then flew to London to lie about being pregnant when you took her up on that ultimatum? That's the condensed version, yes. And now she's living with her parents because she got caught committing tax fraud. Also yes. Sounds like your wife was reading the wrong chapters," she'd said, and that line had become our private joke. Anytime we encountered relationship drama, whether in movies, books, or real life, one of us would comment about people reading the wrong chapters. With Aoife, everything was refreshingly normal. We traveled together without it becoming a logistical nightmare or an excuse for Instagram content. We cooked together without turning it into a competition or a therapy session. We built something real based on actually liking each other as people, rather than just being addicted to the drama and chaos that some people mistake for passion. The contrast wasn't lost on me, especially when I'd see Adrian around the building. Poor Adrian, who'd gone from thinking he was the main character in some romantic drama to being the punchline of everyone's jokes. The man couldn't walk through the lobby without someone making a book club reference or asking if he needed tissues. His professional life in London hadn't exactly flourished either. Word travels fast in corporate circles, especially when someone has a reputation for being the kind of person who breaks up marriages for sport. Adrian's career trajectory had gone from promising transfer to "why is that guy still here?" in record time. But the real entertainment came from watching him try to process seeing me happy. Actually, genuinely happy, not just pretending to be fine while dying inside. When Adrian saw me with Aoife, laughing at her jokes, holding her hand, looking like someone who'd finally figured out what healthy relationships were supposed to feel like, the jealousy in his eyes was absolutely priceless. This was the man who'd thought he was winning by stealing Clara away from me, who'd bragged to his gym buddies about his conquest, who'd convinced himself that he was some sort of romantic hero rescuing a woman from an unhappy marriage. Now he was watching me build something infinitely better with someone who actually deserved it, while he lived alone in corporate housing with a reputation that followed him like a bad smell. The irony was beautiful. Adrian had gotten exactly what he'd wanted, Clara, and discovered that winning a prize nobody else wants isn't actually winning at all. Meanwhile, I'd lost something I'd thought I wanted to keep and found something infinitely better in the process. Aoife and I started talking about making things permanent. Not in the rushed, desperate way that people do when they're trying to fix something broken, but in the calm, confident way that happens when you've found someone who makes sense. British residency, long-term plans, the kind of future building that actually felt exciting rather than terrifying. The company had offered to sponsor my permanent residency, which would put me on track for British citizenship if I wanted it. The idea of officially cutting ties with my old life, of literally becoming a citizen of a different country, felt like the ultimate fresh start. Not running away from my problems, but graduating from them into something better. Every weekend with Aoife was a reminder of what weekends were supposed to feel like. No mystery plans, no secret meetings, no wondering if the person you loved was lying to your face about where they were going. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company. Building memories instead of collecting secrets. We'd take day trips to Bath or Brighton, explore different neighborhoods in London, or just spend lazy Sundays reading in bed while rain pattered against the windows. Simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after 3 years of marriage to someone who treated our relationship like a part-time job she was constantly trying to quit. The best part? Adrian got to watch it all unfold, since we lived in the same building. Every time he saw us together, coming back from a weekend trip, heading out for dinner, or just walking through the lobby looking like people who actually liked each other, I could see it eating away at him. This was the life he'd thought he was destroying when he'd seduced Clara away from me. Instead, he'd done me the biggest favor of my life by removing someone who was never going to make me happy and clearing the path for someone who actually could. Karma, it turned out, had a sense of poetry that would make Shakespeare weep with envy. Looking back on this whole clusterfuck of a year, I have exactly one regret: not taking the London job the first time they offered it to me. Not the second time either, but definitely not the first time. I could have saved myself months of watching my marriage decompose like roadkill in the summer heat. Months of pretending that Clara's weekend book club activities were anything other than a slow-motion betrayal set to the soundtrack of my own denial. The truth is, I'd been sacrificing pieces of myself for someone who never valued the sacrifice. While I was turning down dream opportunities and restructuring my entire future around Clara's unwillingness to leave her precious hometown, she was busy restructuring her weekends around her ex-husband's emotional needs. The math never worked in my favor, but I'd been too invested in the sunk cost fallacy to notice. You know what's funny about hindsight? It's not just 2020. It's high-definition, IMAX quality clarity that makes you wonder how you ever missed the obvious signs that your life was turning into a daytime soap opera. Every red flag I'd ignored, every excuse I'd accepted, every time I'd chosen to trust someone who was systematically proving herself untrustworthy. It all looked so painfully clear from my Thames View apartment in London. Clara's social media presence these days is a masterclass in performative healing. She posts those cryptic, inspirational quotes that divorced people love so much. You know the ones. Growth through pain, stronger than yesterday. The universe removes people from your life to make room for better things. All with comments turned off, because apparently enlightenment doesn't include being open to feedback. My personal favorite was her recent post about learning to love yourself before you can love someone else, which was rich coming from someone who'd spent our entire marriage seeking validation from every man except her actual husband. But hey, if Instagram quotes about self-discovery help her sleep at night in her childhood bedroom, more power to her. Adrian's online presence, meanwhile, has become virtually non-existent. The man who used to post gym selfies and motivational content about grinding and winning has gone dark, probably because it's hard to maintain a personal brand around success when everyone knows you as Book Club or Cry Club, depending on which scandal they remember better. Last I heard through the London corporate housing gossip network, he'd been trying to transfer back to the States. But apparently his reputation had followed him across the Atlantic like a particularly persistent curse. Turns out that breaking up marriages and crying after sex aren't exactly the kind of qualifications that make HR departments excited about internal transfers. The beautiful thing about karma is that it doesn't just serve justice. It serves justice with style. Adrian had thought he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, but it turned out he was actually playing Russian roulette with his own reputation while everyone else was just living their lives like functional adults. And me? I'm building a life that actually makes sense. A life with someone who doesn't need an ex-husband to feel complete, who doesn't mistake drama for passion, and who thinks the concept of book club as code for cheating is as ridiculous as it actually is. Aoife and I are planning a trip to Ireland next month to meet her family, which feels like the kind of normal relationship milestone that Clara and I never managed to achieve without turning it into a crisis or an excuse for her to reconnect with someone from her past. It's amazing how simple things become when you're with someone who actually wants to be with you. The visa paperwork for permanent residency is moving along faster than expected, which means I'll officially be a British resident by the end of the year. There's something poetic about legally cutting ties with the country where my marriage imploded and officially becoming a citizen of the place where I finally figured out how to be happy to all the people back home who said I should have fought harder for Clara. I have one question. Why? Why fight for someone who gave me an ultimatum about trusting her while she was busy proving herself untrustworthy? Why battle for a marriage with someone who was already emotionally checked out and planning her next relationship? Fighting for your marriage makes sense when both people want to save it. It's romantic and noble and all those things that look good in movies. But fighting to keep someone who doesn't want to be kept is just elaborate self-harm disguised as love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go so they can discover firsthand that the grass isn't actually greener on the other side. Clara wanted to explore her options. I gave her that opportunity by removing myself as an option. She wanted to see if Adrian was worth more than our marriage. I let her find out. She wanted freedom from our relationship. I provided it, along with a front row seat to watch what that freedom actually looked like in practice. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, but it also has impeccable timing. Every time I look out at the Thames from my apartment, or book a weekend trip to Paris with Aoife, or get another promotion at work, I'm reminded that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. You can't build a life worth living on the foundation of someone else's indifference. Clara's living in her childhood bedroom, dealing with tax debt and parental supervision, because she chose drama over stability. Adrian's reputation is so toxic that even LinkedIn recruiters probably cross the street when they see his profile. And I'm planning Christmas markets tours with someone who thinks my jokes are actually funny and doesn't need to check her phone every 5 minutes to feel validated. The math works out pretty clearly when you actually do the calculation that I don't hate Clara anymore. Hate requires too much emotional energy, and frankly, I've got better things to do with my feelings these days. I don't even feel sorry for her, because everything that happened to her was the direct result of her own choices. She wanted to play adult games, and she won adult prizes. If anything, I'm grateful. Grateful that she was stupid enough to give me that ultimatum. Grateful that she made her priorities so obvious that even my denial couldn't rationalize them away. Grateful that she freed me from a marriage that was slowly killing everything good about who I used to be. Sometimes people do you the biggest favor of your life by showing you exactly who they are. Clara showed me that she was someone who would choose her ex-husband over her actual husband. Someone who would lie and manipulate and blame everyone else for the consequences of her actions. And in showing me who she really was, she also showed me who I could become. Someone who refuses to settle for less than he deserves. Someone who chooses happiness over familiarity. Someone who finally learned that you can't love someone into being worthy of that love. Every morning when I wake up in London, in my beautiful apartment with my beautiful life and my beautiful girlfriend who actually wants to be there, I smile and think the same thing. I finally chose myself. And it was the best decision I ever made.